Madranamona says, you said before you consider language a living entity to some degree. Some influences on you are clear: Kinner, Fenollosa, Joyce, Derrida, and company. But I would be interested in a fuller disquisition on your thoughts on language. Also, you said once, talking loosely in relation to Maturana and Varela, you consider firm division between animate, inanimate, and living dead, largely due to poor metaphysics. Yeah, both of those are true. I think language is a symbiotic organism that needs us to use it, but we also obviously require its use. And we evolve differently because of its use, and it evolves differently when we use it. I do not believe it is something that is just completely arbitrarily made up. Now, I'm not saying, of course, that there is any necessary connection between the sound or orthography of a particular word and what it means. Obviously, we're all in the post Fernand Saussure age when we realize that sign and signifier are separate, and there's always that kind of that lack in the relationship between them, that empty parenthesis. But I think insofar as we can take neuroscience seriously, it's pretty clear that the capacity for language is one of our basic neurological functions. So that the fact that we use it and the way we use it, and I'm not talking about any specific cultural way, I just mean in general, is part of our literal genetic code. I think it is, and I'm being literal here. I'm not talking figuratively. The same way that our DNA has over billions of years has gradually captured sections of the DNA from other organisms and incorporated it. The same way, for example, that the different parts of the eukaryotic cell were probably once separate organisms that were all incorporated into a single multifaceted organism. I think language was incorporated into us in the same way. And I do think it's alive independently of us. I think we're vessels for it. And my entire interest in using it as a writer, as an artist, is to apply language to the world in a way that changes the world as the person, reading what I've written will be able to perceive it and think about it. And then that person will have a different relationship between, these chemical substances of language and perception, or language and world, and go on to do something else with it. I don't regard myself as any sort of I hate all kind of what am I looking to say here? Like these Svengali theories of the author or the artist, the isolated great genius. Bullshit. That's not how it works. The way it works is that you work as hard as you fucking can, and it takes years and years of brutally difficult practice. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done in my fucking life. I have had a life that included a number of pretty hard things, and writing is still one of the hardest things I have to do. It is an ongoing test, and a difficult one, to make yourself the alembic in which the alchemical interaction of language and world, or language and organism, or whatever, can take place. That's what being an artist is. Being an artist is not being some Promethean genius who has something to say about everything in the fucking world. That's how people who aren't artists think about it. Being an artist is being a medium in the most literal possible sense. And what you said about Maturana and Varela, yes, absolutely. To those who may not know what I'm talking about, there was two guys. I believe one of them was a philosopher and one of them was a cognitive scientist, I think, named Francisco Varela and Humberto Maturana. And they came up with a philosophical idea called the Santiago cosmology. And the idea of the Santiago cosmology is that the basic substance in the universe is cognition. And by cognition, what they mean is anything that is affected by an outside influence changes internally and then puts out something different according to the change caused by that influence. So A affects B, and then B does something different. And in that cosmology, there is no difference in category between, say, the interaction of subatomic particles and the process of human perception leading to altered human thought, leading to altered human action. And I think that is exactly right. I think the restriction of thought to, the higher mammals, for example, is complete artificial bullshit. I think it is absurd to think that only we have minds. Basically, it's the artifact of basically a kind of religious dominionism. That man shall have dominion over all the things that fly and crawl and swim on the earth. Fuck that. I don't believe in that at all. I think everything thinks. And when I say everything, I don't just mean every animal or even, every plant. I think that what are normally called inanimate objects think, because they demonstrate exactly the same kind of response to exterior stimuli that animals or plants stimulate. They just not stimulate, that animals or plants events. They just do it in a very different way. That doesn't mean they're not thinking. That doesn't mean they are not conscious on some very different level of consciousness. It's just that we have based our entire idea of consciousness on a very narrow human definition, because humans are deeply fucking chauvinist about almost everything, and we can't bear the idea that we're not the most special creatures in the fucking universe. Further reading, man, I don't know. I'm sure Maturana and Varela have written a book about this, but I can't think of anything off the top of my head. And before I forget, one more point I want to make about that Maturana and Varela Santiago cosmology thing. Just as easily as you could say that the basic function of everything is cognition, I would bring in language here and say the basic substance of the cosmos is metaphor. That's what everything is made out of. Everything is metaphor. What is metaphor? Metaphoros, carrying beyond. Literally everything is in motion from one point to another and transforming along the way. And that describes electrons and chemical reactions, and it describes the course of planets, and it describes the course of human lives. And so when you use language, because every word is originally a metaphor, if you go back far enough, metaphor is the rule of language. It was I believe it was Fenollosa who said a word is a fossil poem. And Ralph Waldo Emerson says something very similar. I think he said every word was once an animal. There are no words that aren't ultimately based in metaphor. So when you use language, whether written or spoken, you are not just, reenacting figuratively. You are literally involved in the most basic creation of another cosmos, a microcosmos that enters into communication with and is transformed by the greater cosmos. And that's why when, you read or hear something truly important, something that truly matters to you, the world seems like a different place. It doesn't seem like a different place. It is a different place. There is a new cosmos in it that has transformed everything it touches via that contact, and also been transformed by it, and will continue transforming over time. I don't think language is this sort of artificial intellectual construct that we have introduced into an environment with which it's fundamentally incompatible in some way. I think that's an absurd way to think of things. Language is absolutely and without question as much a part of the universe as any, by the standard definition, living organism, because it is made of the same thing. It does the same thing. So if you want to call that a Fenoliosan or a Derridian take on the Santiago cosmology, I guess that would be fair.